everybody. I'm Chad Eckert. It's not Eric Martins. Today, it is still the Fantasy Golf Pod interview series. Cheers to that. I got a Coors Light today. It's the middle of the afternoon. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Golf Pod. You can look us up on iTunes now. Fantasy Golf Pod. Search for that. Boys and girls, we got them. Pat Mayo is here today to speak to the Fantasy Golf Pod. Are you confused, Pat?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Not going to lie to you.
Yeah, right. For some reason, Pat has agreed to do this pod with me today on the eve of his second child being born. You don't have much time, and you're doing this. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I got shows that are currently exporting for when I'm gone, so I got like a free half hour, so we're good to go.
Okay, half hour with Pat Mayo. It's unbelievable. Now, Eric, my co-host, wanted me to ask you, since starting this podcast, we have both had children. I have two. He has two. We both have had children during this process. And our content creating abilities have been hindered. We wanted to ask you, how's it been different having a kid and creating content? Is it the same? Is your wife really nice and helpful?
Yeah, well, my wife is super helpful when it comes down to it. Daycare works out really well, especially like early daycare. That helps, but it's all planning. Like I can do my research from home. I don't need to be in the studio to do my research. So I can watch him while he's at home. It's going to be a bit difficult, I think, with the second one. I mean, if we had three, that would be too much. But maybe you can lend me some insight on that. Like, how much harder is the second one? Because I was thinking, well, the time isn't going to be double because, like, we're familiar with how to do things now. Like, we were so stressed out with the first one, like, oh, my God, are we killing the baby? Like, do you give him, like, this much milk or that much milk? Or, well, what's going on here? Like, we're through that part of it. We know how it works now.
Well, so my second is now 5 months old next week. So I've got through the grind. The quarantine has been a complete grind for me because it's all baby. So, like, I wasn't going to be able to do anything anyway over the last few months because I got this baby. It changes things. Let me tell you that for sure. I mean, you're going to have a little more one-on-one time. You're going to have to maybe worry about your wife getting a little angry at you maybe, but whatever, it's fine. This interview, though, we wanted to get on the record done. I probably won't publish this until after your child's born. So congratulations, you've had a child. You recently did do an interview pod with Nick from Big Dogs Gotta Eat. It was great. It was on YouTube. It's on his podcast. It's about the business of your fantasy sports life. I loved it. I watched it. It was great. I had actually a couple questions from watching that. So I thought, well, great. This will be great. Talk to you about some of that. Maybe get some more specifics. First off, you do a dozen shows a week, like you said. How do you have the energy? Where's the energy come from? My God.
This is my job. This is what I do. So some people look at it like, oh, you do 12 shows a week. That's a lot. Other people come at me and say, well, you do 12 hours of work a week. That's not so bad. Like it's somewhere in the middle of that. Like maybe it doesn't take quite as long because I've been doing this for so long that, if this was 5 years ago when I was doing 12 shows a week, it would probably take me 120 hours a week to do it. I'm a bit better at it now. I have help with my producer, Paul. We can kind of double team this. Sure. So we're more efficient. It's still long hours, but we're far more efficient so we can do as much as possible. And that becomes the thing too. Like you get so used to working so many hours that if you do end up having free hours, you're like, well, I can just do more content. This is fine.
And you're aware of duration times. The energy is important. You talked to what was the guy of Big Dogs Gotta Eat. You talked to him about what's important. You do have a consulting business. The most important thing, though, you mentioned was sound. How do we sound? Is that what you say to people who want to start a podcast? They're going to start right out. You say, if you don't have the right sound, don't even try it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't mean like the sound of your voice doesn't really matter, as evidenced by me. I mean, it can hinder the overall upside of any sort of show, but if your audio is shit, your show is going to be shit. It's just as simple as that. So figure that the fuck out first. And also figure that out, figure out the right equipment. And this stuff isn't super expensive. You just instead of just talking into your computer, talk into a $50 microphone. I would suggest you go higher than that, but you probably don't need to at the outset. Like that's going to make you sound so much better to begin with.
Totally.
Like even buying like a little audio board that cost $100, like that sort of thing, figuring out proper editing equipment, knowing how to use that editing equipment, that if there is a buzz in the background or you sound a bit hollow, can you fix that after the fact? Because that's going to save you a whole lot of headaches. So that's kind of key one. And the second thing about podcasting is you need to do it. It's fine. Everyone wants to start a podcast. I think everyone at this point has started a podcast. How many last between over 2 shows? Hardly any. Like it's people always talk about the restaurant business where, like 90% of business owners go out of business in the first 3 years. Like, yeah, it's exactly the same with podcasts. If you don't have a normal schedule, how the fuck is anyone going to find you? They're not going to find you. They're like, well, like just like, honestly, like my golf show that I do with Geoff, people know that it comes out every Monday afternoon. They know when to go check for it when it comes out. Like that's a huge part of it, is that they know when it's going to drop. So people are eager to go find it because they know that's something reliable that they're always going to have at that time on that day every single week. If you put out one podcast on a Tuesday and then you do it the next day on a Wednesday and then don't release one for 3 weeks, like people aren't going to come back to that.
Pat, how and when did you become the PME? It's just something that you've always wanted to do, is be a content creator? Is this like your goal in life?
Yeah, of course. I actually wanted to be a writer-director, but that didn't really work out for me. So sports broadcasting was a nice, healthy alternative.
Okay, well, fun. Sweet. You've been doing this for a little while, and you've been hooked up with DraftKings for a few years now. How's the partnership with them going?
Tremendous. DraftKings is, people shit on DraftKings all the time because of this and because of that, but like to work with, they're amazing. Like they are really hands off. When they reached out to me that they wanted me to be a content creator with them in contract, they were like, yeah, we're hiring you to do what you do. Like we don't want to tell you what to do. So just, here's a camera, release it on our channel. You're good to go. So I have never actually had a problem with them in any sort of way, whether it be, you need to hammer down on that. And I'm pretty willing to be doing stuff. I did some Madden streams for them. Didn't particularly enjoy doing that. So, I don't do them anymore. They were like, yeah, this isn't really your bag. We get it. And I was like, it's not really my bag. My bag is sitting here and talking to people about sporting events or whatever it might be. Like that was one of the big things too that I told them. I was like, my show every day isn't going to be about sports, even sports that are on DraftKings. It could be about anything. They're like, whatever, just do your show. That's all we really want.
Dude, that's awesome. So that's good. And they recently partnered with the PGA Tour, and you've always been Mr. PGA Tour. So how's that going to be? Like, are you happy about this partnership? What are we going to see from the partnership? Are we going to see you hosting a green zone on the Golf Channel?
I wish. I have no insight to that. So the one weird thing about working in conjunction with DraftKings is that I'm not an employee of DraftKings. I'm a contractor. So when that whole thing went down a few years ago where people were like looking at ownership percentages, but they weren't, but that was the public narrative behind it, there was a lot of safeguards put in place that there's certain information only employees can have and the rest of the world cannot have. It's like how if you're an employee, you can't play on DraftKings. So in order to safeguard themselves legally, I can't know a lot of that information. So they'll come to me and be like, Pat, you're doing a video every week for the PGA Tour. And I'm like, oh, holy shit, this is great. This is going to be like the most exposure I've ever got. For sure. Just tell me when I need to submit it. But other than that, that's all I kind of really know.
Okay. So they're not going to make you move to Boston. You're in Toronto, right? That's where you're quarantined at the moment?
Yeah, so I was initially going to move to Boston. I made the pitch to Matt Kalish just before coming on board. It's like, I don't see why I need to be in Boston. Like, what's the difference? Like, why can't I just do it from here? And he's like, good point.
Yeah. Well, especially now with work from home becoming the norm.
Yeah, so I actually have a space for my studio that is outside of my home, but it worked out really well in quarantine that I was still able to come into it because, max, there's going to be 2 people ever in the studio. Like, if people have been watching the show during the quarantine, like Fienberg's not in studio. I just call him at home now. When that is lifted, he can come back in, but we're able to social distance pretty easily here and control who comes in and out when there's only 2 people.
Okay, so you mentioned Fienberg. You've got a little bit of a team. You got the PME team. You got deep voice producer Paul, and you got Fienberg, and you got your boy Cust. I think we all know, like, you met Fienberg. You happen to sit next to each other, and you just instantly hit it off talking about golf. What's the story behind Fienberg? Is there any more to that?
I mean, he'd worked in sports media for ages. Like when he was an intern, he was Cam Stewart's intern at The Score in Toronto, which was the 3rd national sports network. There was TSN, which is like our ESPN. There's Rogers, which is like Fox, but closer to TSN. And then there was this third one, which had like hardcore sports radio on Sirius. They did a bunch of highlights all day. It was a smaller station. That's where Cam was. That's where Gabe Morency was. A lot of the people that we ended up having at Fantasy ended up working at the Score when that ended up shutting down. So that's where Geoff got his start. So he learned really from, as it turned out, like the best people possible in the age of being on the internet. Like, you can talk how you want. You can talk about gambling. You go to these big places for years, like gambling. Oh, can't bring that up. That's illegal. You can't do that. Although it wasn't illegal in Canada, they still didn't want to touch it.
Okay. Is he also, we're hoping to get Fienberg on the show at some point and talk to him about his little story, but the more important person to talk to you about is Tim Cust, because you're like best friends with him. This is kind of like your Eric. You've been friends forever. He's in your wedding, whatever. Is there a story behind you meet? We personally kind of wanted to know. We've done this ourselves. Where's the first memory of you and Tim? Do you have like a old memory?
I met Tim my senior year of college. So that's basically about it. And we were like the two people in the class who smoked. So I met him outside smoking.
Okay, so then he's a character. You get to like give him crap about his opinion. I just think he's more like your Eric, where you kind of like feel like you could boss him around a little bit and tell him what to do. And then also he just knows at the end of the day, he's just your friend and it'll be fine.
Yeah, he has the thickest skin of anyone I've ever met. And he's like the real world nicest person you'd ever want to meet. So he doesn't take any of this stuff personally. And like, he gets it's a show. Like, he understands that two people agreeing with each other on a show over and over and over. Not to say that he is going out of his way to disagree. He's just a natural contrarian in that sense. Right. But he gets that conflict makes good shows. Like, you see so many of these podcasts. Maybe that's step number 3, the final layer of having a podcast or having an internet TV show or any TV show, that if you have two people who agree with each other about everything, no one's going to fucking want to listen to that.
Right? No, my dad tells me I got to yell at Eric and he's got to tell me that I'm wrong. And we get the feedback like, no, you didn't yell at each other enough. So here we are. You are in the fantasy golf world. When did you start first playing fantasy sports? Was it like everyone where you got your friends, you're in the basement, you're drafting teams, or like, where did it begin?
Yeah, it's exactly that. So I think it was my senior year in high school I started playing, so like 2002, 2003, like around that. And I think the first time I played fantasy golf was 2006. Yahoo used to have fantasy golf. Yeah. So we were playing fantasy football, we were playing fantasy baseball, and we all like kind of paid attention to golf. Like, oh, the majors, we'll pay attention to, like a lot of casual players do now. So we just started this fantasy golf league. And I think of, the 14 people that played in our fantasy football league, 5 of us played in this fantasy golf league. But right. It's one of these things where you get grandfathered into it. Like, you learn all the players, you learn all the events, just like, and after 5 years of doing that, I ended up writing golf at Roto Experts. So I was the only person who had ever played fantasy golf before. It's like, I guess I'll write about it. And then when you start writing about something and covering something, the knowledge base goes up exponentially. Like, you're on the good part of the parabolic curve that you're now into this, you have to research it, and that stuff just sticks.
So let's talk about the research and what you do each week, because you're doing more than just golf. You're doing other sports and everything. But for your golf process, what's it like? You got the show on Monday that you're looking at the betting board, and then you do Tuesdays. You got the DraftKings shows, usually Rick Rudgood or Ben Rosler or something like that. What do you make lineups even? Do you play DraftKings? Do you even have time for this crap?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm usually filling out lineups or at least constructing lineups. I basically, since Fantasy National has come along, it's really sped up the process. I remember doing my golf research and having like 12 tabs open at the top of my screen. Like, I need a course history page. I need 8 separate stat pages on PGA Tour just to open and look at. And they're all shit anyway, because they just tell you who's been doing well for the entire season. Like, if we're into June, Brendan Todd's numbers from October probably aren't telling me too much at this point when he went on his hot run. Let's see how he's been doing recently. So that was sort of the impetus behind Fantasy National in the first place, was that it'll be good for users because it's super easy to make lineups. And that's how I make all my lineups on there. I star my players, I weight my percentages, I hit export lineups. It actually doesn't take very long at all. But the research process, a new tournament and a major is a little bit different, but since there are so many repeat courses on the PGA Tour, like, I'll go back and read my last 3 years worth of columns before I write my next column, which usually comes out on Monday mornings. That's the first piece of media that comes out for me. And that's just sort of encapsulating all my thoughts. Like there's a lot of similar information year to year because some stuff doesn't change, but like, oh, why did I pick that guy last year? Why was I so wrong about that guy? I'd like to say, why was I so right about that guy? But that so rarely happens. That why was I wrong? Was it he had a shitty tournament and it was just that? Was my process wrong? I like to refine it every single year and try to reflect that in the new column. And that reflects in my research too. Like, what did I miss? So if I go back and, because I save all my models on Fantasy Nationals, like, why did I weight these things? I can go back and read why I weighted those things. I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work. What do I need to do to adjust? Was it one bad year? Is that an outlier year? So that's really where the research process goes in. Like, you know the names, you know, if you do this every week, you know the baseline skills of even the 150th ranked player in the field that week. You know who the back end guys are. Maybe at the beginning of the year when they're new web guys, then you have to let stuff play out a little bit. But once you're into the mid-season form, like even by February with tournaments going, you know who the $6,000 players are. They're not absolute jabronis. They're guys that play every single week. You know, like that Trey Mullinax can hit the ball 370 yards. That's literally all he can do. Does that play this week? Maybe it does. We'll find out. So that's sort of the research that I go through. Then I try to compartmentalize everything. Like the odds are out before the DraftKings pricing. Hence, we do the betting show before the DraftKings show. When the DraftKings pricing comes out, we try to be on top of that right away. Doing the live chat always really helps. Once I get into the after football finishes and I have time to do that on Wednesdays, just people present different ideas that you didn't even consider. So getting all this information is really good. And like the point of my show, and it was sort of the same thing with Fantasy National too. It's not for me to tell you who to take. I'm going to present you information that I've dug up. You can choose to agree with that information and use it positively, negatively, whatever it might be. But I'm just giving you information that you can use. So like I've won a few times one time pretty big for me on DraftKings. I won 20K, but I've had other like 5K cashes, 3K cashes. That's always fun. But like the people who use the show and use the site just do way better than I do. Like they're better at the actual picks than I am.
Or lucky, whatever. Let's talk about your hashtag mega profit when it was Satoshi Kodaira. Wasn't that the tournament that you won? Was it 15K on that guy? I don't even remember, but it was like a year and a half ago. The tournament like got rained out, or I don't know. Something happened that all of a sudden it was off TV and we had to listen to it on the radio.
Yeah, so it was the Heritage the week after I think Patrick Reed won the Masters, so 2017. Satoshi ended up winning and beating my guy, in the playoff, but there was like inclement weather on the Sunday, so they moved everyone up to start at like 6 a.m. So that's like when the leaders went off. So I was like, it was my birthday, so I was like hungover. I woke up and totally forgot that they had started early and woke up with like one hole to go. Kodaira had already posted. I had no clue what was going on. I had a whole bunch of like Twitter messages like, Mayo, you're in the running for this. So, like, in the running for what? And it was the giant $5. And I lucked out because it was the week after the Masters. The prize pool is always juiced up the week after a major because so many people have extra money left over. That first prize for the $5 that week, I think, was like 100K. So it was like 100K, 50K, 20K. And because Kodaira won and beat Siwoo in the playoff, I was the only guy with Kodaira up there, and the rest of my team was fine. I didn't have Siwoo in that lineup, which was really bizarre for me. But that was the big differentiator between me and first, but also me third to 12th, was Kodaira was the one who put it up. If Kodaira had lost that playoff, I think I would have finished like 15th.
Okay. Now, are you playing the same contests every week? Do you have a routine on what you're doing? You're doing the PME Experience Open every week, 3-entry max deal. Do you do 3 entries mostly? Or I know you've talked about this a lot. Maybe people know this already about you, but what do you have, like a specific routine?
Yeah, I usually put in 20 to 30 lineups in whatever like the giant 4 or the giant 5 is, just because I like building lineups. And just building lineups is the most fun part about this, besides winning, I suppose. But like that's the most fun throughout the week, is making these different combinations. I'll play the 3 in my contest. I'll usually play 2 or 3 in the 44. Try to play a high, like a $100 or $150 single entry. And that's basically it. I have far more down betting wise than I do on DraftKings week to week.
Where do you see PGA betting in 5 years? Do you think it's going to overtake the other sports? Because it is probably the most fun. I mean,
when you say the other sports, what sports are you talking about?
Like not NFL, like NBA, baseball. I mean, it probably should already. Does it already? I don't even know.
It doesn't. I think in terms of like the difference is like overall handle on PGA is inherently always going to be lower because it's only once a week that you're going to bet.
Okay.
And outright bets are the worst bets you can make. They're also the most fun you can make in terms of betting. So I tend to play those more than when I should be playing head-to-heads and top 20s and round by round betting, that kind of thing. That's where like actual bettors, profitable bettors, that's where they actually have an edge in running all this stuff. So the overall handle where baseball and basketball is every single night just is never going to be as high. But in terms of money put down per, I think it has a good chance to be second behind NFL.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's good for us. What about your off, besides they're doing wrong with their sound. Mine just messed up. And their backgrounds and stuff. You have Mayo Media Inc. Tell us a little bit about that and what you do for other people that help, or that's trying to do it. Don't make fun of my stuff. Don't rip me. I got this amateur hour background, but what do you do with Mayo Media?
So it's essentially what I talked about at the beginning. Anyone in the interest of, basically, it's a consultation business. So if people want to go on video, they want to create their own studio, I can walk them through the process of creating their own studio. Here are the programs you need. Here are the cameras you need. Here's the lighting you need. Here are the microphones that you need. And if you give me a budget, I can figure out what works within that budget. Some people are like, well, I have $100. What can I do? It's like nothing really. Like, yeah, what do you plan on doing with your $100? So, but if someone's like, here's $500, I can work with that. Like,
no, you're talking about like businesses too that are shifting the way things are going because everyone's going to digital, going online, going live and things like that. And you help consult businesses to do this.
Yeah, so it was funny when the quarantine first started, I got a lot of business only because people were trying to figure out like my product now looks like shit because I have to do it from my house, not my studio. What are just like a few things that I can do? It's like, well, right away, like move your camera up. You don't want to be talking into your camera down like this. Like you'd be shocked how many TV professionals do not know this. How? I don't know. Maybe it's because when you work at like a giant studio, there's always going to be people around you that, they're cameramen. They know what to do. You don't know what to do, but someone's always done it for you. So it doesn't really matter. So just different things like that, like lighting in a studio, how to make the background behind you pop out and look good. I mean, that's one thing that a lot of people don't know how to do. Like it's hard to do. And I've been through it 4 or 5 times for myself now. My first studio was terrible. This studio is going to be better. The next studio, I hope, looks even better than this one.
Okay, last few things before I get you out of here. You do a dozen or so pods a week. I mean, you're doing everything. But also, you're providing content for DKPlaybook.com. You do Golf Digest. You're on TV and stuff like that. Where else are you?
That's basically it. It's funny. Like I try to really limit the amount of appearances I do on other people's shows, which is a hindrance in a way, because that's always the best way to get your name out doing anything. It's just appear on other people. Like, listen, if you tune into the Pat Mayo Experience, chances are you know who I am. When I appear on other people's shows, they might not know who I am, so they come to me. It's the best way to market yourself, just bar none. Out there is to appear on other people's platforms and then take some of those people and bring them back with you. You can be fans of both of them, that kind of thing. But that's the one thing that really restricts me in terms of timing, is that I can't dedicate 3 hours a week to appearing on other people's stuff because I'm really pressed at both ends. Like I try to maximize the amount of content I can do a week. Like during football season, I'm still running the golf. Fortunately, Paul and Cody have UFC on lockdown for me that way. But like I'm doing hits for different NBC platforms like SNY or NBC Philly or like Fox Sports Denver, that kind of thing. Like just 1-minute videos, which don't seem like they would take a lot of time, but you have to write them. You have to put them in the prompter. You have to make sure that they're to time. You have to edit them. You have to send them off. Like all that stuff ends up piling up. The show, at least itself, where Paul is so good at building the graphics and mixing in the graphics as we go, that we have that sort of down to a science right now. That as long as I can get a guest, as long as we have a topic to talk about, we can make a show out of that. The other stuff, like writing, it's why I don't write as much anymore, to be perfectly honest with you. That takes fucking forever.
Yeah, I used to do that all the time. Hours and hours and hours late at night, and then it's like, who reads this shit anyway? Who knows?
Yeah, like I used to write a rankings column for football for probably about 6 years, from like 2009 to 2015. And it used to be released on Thursday mornings. And I would start writing it around 5 p.m. on Wednesday and basically be up until 7 a.m. on Thursday before I submitted it.
Well, you're a good man, Pat. Now, okay. When When is CBS going to come calling over the Golf Channel and they're going to knock on your door, dude? They're going to take you away. They're going to sign you to some big contract, put you on TV. Is that the dream? Is that the end goal here?
I actually have no idea. People ask me this all the time. Like, what is the goal of this? I actually have no clue. I like doing my show is one thing I really enjoy. And that's the reason that I continuously do it. I've been doing it for, almost a decade now. That I enjoy sitting behind the mic on my show, being able to dictate what I get to talk about. That way I'm never out of my element. But in order to go to that next level, obviously Golf Channel, CBS, whether it be Fox for the US Open, like getting opportunities like that would be awesome. I would jump at the chance to do them, but I'd have to figure out how to work that around the rest of the stuff that I do.
Course, and you will, and they will come calling. I know it, because you are the best, dude. You are the man. You are a great ambassador to the DFS industry, to fantasy golf. I appreciate you. Literally, I hope things don't collapse around you with baby number 2 and you can't do this anymore, because I love your content. I listen to it every week. I love the quarantine stuff with Davis. I listen to all of those. You've been really, honestly, like the reason and the inspiration behind the fantasy golf pod of trying this stuff out and just pretending to do it. Fake it till we make it. I have mad respect for you, Pat. Let's do this again soon, right?
All right, man. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you. Peace out.